Hello, everybody. Gonna give everybody a couple minutes to get in, but welcome. Alrighty. So welcome. This is the very first joint Mountain View San Francisco virtual meetup for Angular. We're very happy to have you all here, and we have some exciting guests coming up. Um, so first things first, I'm Kevin. I'm a member of the Angular team here at Google. I'm a program manager, and today we will have two speakers. We have the amazing Deborah Kurata, a consultant at InStep Technologies. And then we also have Mark Thompson, a senior developer relations engineer, also at Google on the Angular team. And we're going to have some very interesting topics to cover for you today. First of all, Mark is going to be talking to everybody about the state of Angular. So, where Angular is right now and where it's going to be in the future. And we have some exciting stuff there. And then next up, we're going to have Deborah. She's going to talk about RxJS in Angular. And so we're going to learn a lot more about that. This is going to be a lot of good information. And then lastly, we'll wrap it up with a Q&A. So if you have any questions, definitely drop those in the chat throughout. And then we can address them at the end. And then finally, we are going to have a little bit of information about future meetups after that. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, I think we can turn things over pretty soon to Mark. Take it away, Mark.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Am I muted? I am not muted. See, I started off strong. I see a bunch of friends in the chat. What's going on? Michael in the building. Michael Faith, I see you. Welcome to the party. So glad to have you. Good to have everybody. Julius, Ash, and Ambroise, like everybody. Fact that you folks are here is super fantastic. Kevin, fantastic part of the team. He's been helping out, and I'm just really excited about not only this event, but I'm also excited about what's to come. Kevin, can you just give them a preview, just a little hint about the future of this event?
Yeah, so as you all know, this is the first joint Mountain View San Francisco meetup. We're doing a joint meetup just because since it's virtual, we figured it makes more sense to bring everybody together. Maybe you can meet some new friends, meet some new people. But then in the new year, we're planning to get back to in-person meetups. So as we can see, Mark is very excited about that. And we're really looking forward to that. Those will then stop being joint. So we'll have meetups, of course, for Mountain View. We'll have meetups for San Francisco. So if you're in the Bay Area, we can't wait to see you there. So look for those coming in January. But we definitely will. Obviously, we have this one, and then we will have another meetup in November. So stay tuned for that and for more exciting topics there. And then, we'll get back to in-person stuff in the new year. Can't wait.
I know that's super exciting. I think the community coming together in person is going to be great. Shout
Absolutely.
out to a few people in the chat I see. Okay, we got Red in the building. What's going on? Good to see you again. Starving Musician in the building. So, Kevin, a few of these friends are people who also come to the gaming live stream that we do every month, myself and Jeremy. So, I see some familiar faces, but we have someone who said this is their first Angular meetup. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so glad to have you. Kevin, I can start my presentation when you feel like it's a good time.
Sure. I think any time is good.
All right, so let me go ahead and get my slides on the screen, and
I will
then,
kick
friends, we're about
myself
to.
off the screen.
It's all right. So let's just get started again. Hey, friends, my name is Mark Thompson. As Kevin said, I'm a senior developer relations engineer working on Angular here at Google. And where am I here today, right? I'm here to update everyone on the current state of Angular. So if you may be new to Angular, I'd love to kind of give you just a high level overview of what Angular actually is. And Angular is really a framework that's designed to support developers as they build scalable web applications. Now, Whether it's scaling your product as user demand increases, or maybe you're scaling your team to meet growing technical needs, like all kinds of stuff happens here. Angular has been there and will continue to be there. And friends, if you've been just keeping track of what we've been doing since the Ivy rollout back in 2020, you know that we are here, and there's so much exciting stuff happening. And as somebody hinted to in the chat, the plans for V15 are really exciting, so hold on for that. All right, so now the Angular team has been hard at work delivering great features to support developers all over the world, as you friends have been building scalable, performant applications. And recently, we've completed some major products that we are so proud of. And you know what? I'm just going to jump into it. I cannot wait to share some more with you. Now, as I mentioned briefly about 2020, the Angular team rewrote from the ground up the runtime and compiler. And so, as if you're using at least the latest version of Angular, then your apps are powered by what? The more powerful and more efficient Ivy rendering engine, right? And some of us have seen some of the advantages firsthand in our projects, but there's improved type checking and error reporting. There's better debugging. There's smaller bundle sizes and so much more. Now, let's take a few moments to talk even more about some of the other enhancements that have been made available or made possible by Ivy. All right, so we wanted to give developers an even better integrated tooling experience when authoring Angular code. So what do? Well, we introduced the Ivy-powered Angular language service plugin for VS Code. Now, this thing is great because it boosts developer productivity because it adds what? Type checking. It adds syntax highlighting and error reporting for your templates while you're writing your code. Now, this level of integration was really only made possible by the Ivy compiler. So people ask us, well, then, we make this big deal out of Ivy. What's the kind of outcome of this? Well, this is a perfect example of what Ivy has allowed us to do. And check this out. There are more than 3 million installs of the Angular language service. So I think you can believe me in joining me when I say that developers are enjoying this. Also, here's something else that's really cool. Ivy has enabled the Angular DevTools browser extension, which gives developers more detailed insights into an Angular app at runtime than ever before. Right, so we did have a previous version of DevTools, and then it just got better because now developers can get data for individual change detection cycles. That's a really great level of granularity that you can get. And so this provides a type of information required to really build and maintain those performant production applications that I was alluding to in the intro. Now, while Angular DevTools was already doing good, let's be real, this thing was doing good. We believe that it could do more. So this year, it was announced that DevTools is now supported in all 4 major browsers. That's right. We're not only in Chrome, we're in Edge, we're in Firefox, and for our friends who like Safari, we are in Safari, and it works, and you can build and debug your Angular applications where you feel the most comfortable. And if you want to do cross-browser testing and debug issues across all 4 major browsers, you have that support now, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm so excited about this. And let's just keep talking about some of the other things that's been going on. The team also announced a preview. Okay, so this is for Angular DevTools. We've also announced a preview of dependency injection debugging. So you can explore the injector tree for each of your components, and you can preview its dependencies and from where each injector is coming from. Now, because dependency injection is a core part of Angular, this is a fantastic addition to an already powerful tool set. Now, if you want to try this out, you can find instructions on the new Angular DevTools feature on GitHub. So head over to the GitHub for Angular DevTools, and then you'll get instructions on how you can try this out. But this is early in developer preview, but it is here for you to try. Very, very exciting stuff. What else have we been up to? Well, we have also improved Angular's error messages. Now, Angular's most common errors have been updated with text, with more descriptive text, and have been assigned unique code for each of them, making them more identifiable. And finally, on top of the error messages, we include a link with a guide to help you resolve that error. So now when you get an infamous expression changed after checked, well, you'll get a URL to angular.io where you can learn more on how to fix and debug this issue. Now, the team has done a lot to improve tooling. So, as we are familiar with, in collaboration with James Henry from the community, we've added an option for the third-party ESLint extension. Now, in version 12, we did something else, which was interesting. We did the same thing where we partnered with the community. So we partnered with Cypress, Nightwatch, and WebDriver to get end-to-end testing support. So now you can use your top industry tools to develop for tests, because you know that we ended up deprecating Protractor this year. So if you want to do end-to-end tests, you get to choose from some of the top tools that you have in the community for yourselves. Now, let's continue speaking of build improvements. All right, so ESBuild is a bundler and an optimizer that's implemented in the Go language. Now, we introduced it as a part of our build pipeline where we were replacing some of the functions of Cursor to speed up ng build, which led to a 10% build speed improvement. And now the team is investing in a simpler experimental build pipeline based on ESBuild. And as of today, it has experimental SaaS support. So if you want to experience even more updates in an even smoother build pipeline with ESBuild, go ahead and give this a try. And guess what we found? That with early experiments, code builds are 57% faster. Now, you can give this experimental builder a try. Remember, experimental. All right, so we're still improving it, but it's experimental. But you can give it a try and provide us some feedback right now by replacing the browser builder with the browser ES build builder in your angular.json. So you head over to that file and then you change it from browser builder to ES build builder. Okay. Now, along with better tooling, Ivy does one more thing. It makes Angular faster and more efficient. Okay, I know you've heard this. I'm not even looking at the chat right now because you all are typing up a storm and I can't read it so fast, but I already know you're thinking like, what are you talking about, Mark? Well, let me explain. Okay, so when Ivy became the only Angular compiler at Google, the Angular team saw internal applications reduce their resource usage by 90% during build times. And then one Angular app saw a reduction of 30% in bundle size. Now, that was with some of our internal with our internal applications here at Google, because it is now it has been as well, the runtime. Now, let's switch gears a little bit, because I want to talk about one of Angular's top goals, and that has been to provide an evergreen solution, and this was true for Ivy as well. So to accomplish this, we migrated the entire ecosystem with automated migrations to ensure that no teams or products were left behind. So how did we do this? Think about how, as we were upgrading to the new runtime and compiler, your application still worked. Even if you didn't opt in manually to any changes, your stuff still worked until you were ready, until the whole thing was changed. And so this challenge really felt like that we were changing the engine of the car while the car was rolling down the street, while it was still running. But we were able to improve Angular without negatively impacting users or disrupting your applications. Now that Ivy is landed and we are in the new phase, we can continue building the future of Angular. Okay, so speaking of which, let's talk about where Angular is going next. Now, on the Angular team, we've heard lots of feedback from the community about just what people are interested in, what you're looking for, and we've been in deep discussions about what's next for Angular. You see, we believe that in order to serve the most developers, this is just non-negotiable, we have to create a simpler, more frictionless Angular for existing developers and for those who are new to the framework. And so we have a pretty good idea where to start, and we think that you're really going to like this change. And where do we start? Right here, bam, standalone components. So if you've been using standalone components in your application, put that in the chat. I want to know about that. And because standalone components are a new, simpler way to build components in Angular. Because we all know that building components is a core part of the Angular developer experience. So right now, before Angular introduced standalone components, building components required so much extra configuration. You had to create the component, then you had to ensure that it was imported in the right ng module. And this meant that developers had to understand multiple concepts before building an Angular application. Now, we want to improve this part of the developer experience. So standalone components are designed to simplify application building, and they're really here to streamline the steps that it takes to get started. So let's take a moment to investigate the API. All right, so in the component TypeScript class, we import the dependencies we need for our component. For example, our components, modules, and pipes. Next, we add the standalone property to the component metadata. Now, this allows us to bootstrap our component without an ng module. Can you feel the magic behind that? Can you feel the magic? Without an ng module, we can bootstrap a component, and you can even bootstrap an application. Now, we then update the import property of the component metadata to reference our dependencies. So now our component is ready to be used in the application. Now, the team is, listen, friends, we are hard at work trying to polish this new API to ensure that it can integrate seamlessly with all of your code in a backwards compatible way, because that is how we try to roll out features. We want to make sure that we don't disrupt your development experience. So you can test this out right now, and all you need is version 14, and coming up soon, standalone components will be stable, and that means they'll be certified ready for production, and we'll have some nice little updates that we'll be able to share about those. Now, here's something else very cool. Standalone components have allowed us to create lazy loading at the component level in the router. And actually beyond that, we have made other routing improvements. So now you have lazy loading components, tree shakeable pieces by rewriting the config API, and the ability to write functional route guards. All right, I know some of y'all heard me say that, and it's fire. Yes, I know, functional route guards. Now, there's more to the simpler Angular story. Now, we're also creating an all new, modern, fresh concepts, fresh example, getting started journey for developers that are new to the framework. This new guided path in the documentation will include the most important Angular concepts needed for developers to start building new, exciting applications. Now, I'm thrilled about what's to come, and I can't wait for you folks to try it out. Now, we're not stopping there with updates to the documentation. You see, the team is working hard at making other changes to the documentation that will help to ensure that the content is always a resource to light your path forward as you're on your Angular journey. And we're going to do this with revamped guides, API references, fresh examples, more and more cool stuff. So, we know one thing about Angular, okay, friends? We know one thing about Angular. It is opinionated, right? It's an opinionated framework with best practices built in by default. Now, we've been proudly serving developer communities with this focus for some time now. And so here's this idea of conformance. So what is conformance? Well, conformance is all about building in strong defaults and best practices to help developers build wonderful performant applications. Now, this next initiative fits right in line with those strong defaults. Okay, so in version 14, we launched support for type forms and Angular templates. Yes, the number one most requested feature. And so developers are able to build complex, even nested forms in a safe, backwards compatible method, which supports the incremental migration of your application. So you don't have to make this change immediately. You have some flexibility in how you make this change. Now, what's more is that this feature leverages type checking as a best practice. Plus, to make sure that the adoption of this new feature was smooth for everyone, we tested it on Google's 2,500 plus projects. All right, so let's have a few moments to talk about some of the sample code for our friends who may not have experienced typed forms. So typed forms allows for form groups to throw compile time errors based on common problems like undefined properties. So let's take this example. The cat form group doesn't have a defined property called email. Now developers can find out this error while writing the code and not during the runtime, where users may come across this error, which is causing some unexpected behavior. Now, I think that this is a better experience for everybody involved. It's better for developers and it's better for users alike. Now, there are even more types of errors that we can surface with type forms. For example, we can count on type checking for existing properties of a form group as well. So the lives property here is a number, but the code attempts to call the substring method, which is invalid for number types, right? Again, the best time to find a problem like this is when? During compile time, not during runtime. Your users don't want to find this out during runtime with your forms. So when you pair this with the Angular language service, developers will be treated to error highlighting to help quickly identify the problem. Now, just as we've observed, forms highlight potential problems with undefined properties and with type checking, we can also expect it to catch errors with missing properties. Fantastic work here. So this example demonstrates the issue that arises when the value of the form group is attempted to be set with an object literal that's missing properties that were defined when you created the form group. So that's, again, something that you want to find out now and not have your users find out later. So no matter what you're working on or which features you want to try, Angular wants to provide a path to the latest version of Angular. Now, the Angular CLI's ng update command unlocks the newest that Angular has to offer. So let's take a moment to consider how the Angular team prioritizes the application updating journey and the backwards compatibility of Angular. So many new features that we release are no-op as they come out of the box to the project, to all projects that update, right? So if you update, you get a lot of these features. There's a no-op for you, nothing for you to do. And Angular's goal is to deliver these changes with minimal transition costs. So we don't want you to have to do a ton of work just to get this stuff working. So update.angular.io maintains a record of Angular's recommendations for how to move your app forward. So I saw somebody in the chat say, I think they said they were on version 12. Listen, so go to update.angular.io and then in the from section put version 12 and then say which version you want to update to. And then we're going to try our best to give you some recommendations on how to move forward. So what featurettes are on the horizon? All right, so Angular, I'm going to tell you something. We release features as they are ready. So this means that something like the standalone components, which seems huge, can be in a minor release so long as that it meets our rigorous testing and breaking change requirements, right? So the team wants to enable developers to build for everyone. That is a core thing for us. We want to help you to build for everyone. There are so many different users who experience your applications and experience the internet in a different way. So in addition to the set of accessibility tools that Angular already offers together with static checks and the component development kit, the newest version will introduce streamlined management of your app's page title. So we dropped this, and one of the problems with working with I can't even think of the term, look, single page application, sorry, is that the page title can become an issue. And then when you don't have accurate page titles, this negatively impacts users who use screen readers. So this built-in router feature allows developers to define unique page titles, right? And that's tackling, like I said, that common accessibility issue. Then check this out. We have extended diagnostics, which allow developers, co-editors to warn developers of common mistakes before compilation. So this provides an extendable framework for continuing improvements in developer productivity. So you can do things like catch when nullish coalescing is applied to non-nullable values, and find when a template has a banana in the box error. So sometimes I'll write a box and a banana, and that doesn't make any sense, and then my code doesn't work, and then I'm wondering why. Well, extended diagnostics can help take care of that. And then in addition to the latest RxJS version, TypeScript version, and ES 2020, Angular's newest versions introduce standardized argument passing to ensure that the Angular CLI is consistent and provides what? Better output. Better output, being consistent, that's a win for everybody. But we also introduced 2 new commands. So there's ng analytics, which is a better way to control and print analytics settings. And there's ng cache, which is a way to control and print cache information from the command line. Plus the CLI now added in version 14 autocomplete, so you can get some of your commands autocompleted by pressing tab. Then we also dropped the yarn create at Angular, which means that you can get started without installing the CLI globally. So maybe you don't want to do that. So now you can do yarn create, or you can do npm as well. So both those work. And in addition to these features, we're always continuing to partner with other teams for innovation and exploration on the web. So the team has had the fantastic opportunity to partner with Chrome's Project Aurora to help Angular developers improve the user-centric web performance metrics. Angular improvers, I guess that's what we all are. Now, because of this partnership, Angular apps saw a 110% improvement in core web vitals, right? So this means faster page loads and a better experience for end users from all Angular apps. Now, this is something super duper rad. I mean, so rad. You can use this thing now. We partnered with Chrome on something called the ng optimized image directive. So you add the directive and change your source to ng source, and then boom, ng optimized image makes it easy to adopt the performance and best practices for loading images, and ensure that that loading of the largest contentful paint image is prioritized by, so here's all the things this thing does. It automatically sets the fetch priority attribute on the image tag. There's automatic lazy loading of other image by default. There's asserting that there's a corresponding pre-connect link in the document head. Now, in addition to optimizing the loading of the largest contentful paint image, ng optimized image enforces a number of image best practices. Now, mind you, we're getting all of this by the ng source attribute. When you use this directive, you add this attribute, you're getting all this stuff. So there's using image URLs to apply image optimizations and then there's the requirement that the width and height are set on images. There's a warning if width or height have been set incorrectly. There's a warning if the image will be visually distorted when it's rendered. Again, all we have to do is include this ng optimized image and we're getting all this value. And then there's even more value when you use this thing with the CDN. There's some really cool stuff that you can do. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about partnerships. I hope y'all are excited. So I'm going to take a break for a second and look at the chat. I hope y'all are excited about all this image stuff. Red, you're right. This does sound great. Because it is great. This is super great. So I'm glad that you're enjoying this. Okay, friends? Yeah, you got to get the latest version of Angular. You got to get the ng update story completed on your side. All right. Now, we also partnered with Chrome on something very special, very near and dear to my heart, because as an Angular developer, when I was first learning Angular, this is one of the hardest parts. improved stack traces. Now, let me explain what happened here step by step. First, here's that messy stack trace that you're used to getting, right? So it's producing a cryptic error. So there's a really cryptic error, and it's like kind of blocking you from your most powerful tool when you're debugging, which is what? The ability to be able to read this stack trace and know what's going on. So the first thing that Angular does now is that we want to make the stack trace relevant. So Chrome DevTools removes all the frames coming from code that you didn't author. So we lose context here a little bit, but it was not that helpful, right? So yeah, you don't see some of the other code you didn't offer, but was it really serving you? I don't know, debatable. So this works automatically by automatically instructing Chrome DevTools from the Angular CLI that these scripts were not relevant for debugging. Now, the next step is powerful. It makes the stack trace linked. Angular uses the new async stack tagging API in Zone.js to concatenate the stack traces from asynchronous tasks and put them all together. So now this way you can trace what happened between different micro and macro tasks. Now this additional context was already way better because it shows how the user clicked the submit button which triggered the request, then we called fetch and the execution failed, right? And then all these are code that we wrote in our application. Now wait, now I'm gonna tell you something. What else is happening? Okay, now we're working on this. Okay, this isn't here yet. But it's coming. We're working on improving this a little further. Okay, so you see this generated click listener? It's coming directly from the code generated by Ivy, and it's not that meaningful, even though it points to a template in the JavaScript. The next thing that we're working on in Angular is to make the stack trace even more friendly by mapping the call frame name directly to your templates. Now, that is fire. That is super fire. I got to take off the sweater because it's getting hot because of how fire that is. Okay, wait. Sometimes I talk really fast and I say stuff and I make myself laugh. Okay. All right, but listen, friends, this link stack traces stuff, this will be enabled by default in V15, which is coming really, really soon. And then that new thing where it shows you the template with the click handle, like that stuff's coming. We're working on that, but this new link stack trace stuff is coming in super soon. All right, you want to know even more stuff? Do you want to know even more stuff? Blair, I feel like you want to know more stuff. All right, I'm going to tell you some more stuff. Nuno, I'm going to tell you some more stuff. All right, check this out. Currently, Angular implements destructive hydration. Now, the team has been spending a lot of time investigating the hydration story. See, the focus is on further improving the user experience and the performance of apps and utilizing hydration to further innovate in that space. Now, we are committed to innovate the framework while providing a backwards compatible experience. Because again, we do not want to disrupt your development story, break all your apps, but we're spending time to work on this. So here's what you can do. You want to know what's happening on this front. Make sure that you are locked in on Twitter with us and you're following the latest RFCs, because as we have more information to release, that's where you'll find it. And then finally, Better Together is Angular's partnership to provide a more complete development experience of Angular applications with the power of resources like Google Cloud, Firebase, TensorFlow, and Bazel. So we're working on these stories. We actually just did a great workshop at the Firebase Summit that happened in New York about a week and a half ago, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago. I can't remember. Time flies. Where we were just doing some advanced Angular and RxJS work. It was myself and David East. Fantastic. So we're continuing to deepen these relationships and then just continue the Better Together story. All right, friends. I know you want to know. Are you interested in what else we are working on? Because I've told you about a lot of stuff. Well, you can find that in the public roadmap, and you can find out exactly what we're thinking about. You get insight on exactly what we're working on, what we're thinking about. You can find out about requests for comments, And then you can also check those and the GitHub discussions to find out the status on projects. All right, I just need to know, are you excited about everything that we just covered? I need to know. I see some fire emojis in the chat. I see them, but I need to know if y'all are excited about the stuff that we're working on because there's just a lot happening. And it's going to get better because V15 is coming very soon. There's never been a better time to be an Angular developer. I want to reinforce that. Never been a better time. We are dropping new features. We are improving your experience. We are doing our best to support the Angular community and make Angular the best place to ship and build apps with confidence. So make sure you follow us on Twitter. Check out the YouTube. We got some new content coming out there. And as always, head over to angular.io to learn more about how you can get started if you're new to the framework. Friends, thank you so much for spending time with me during this session. I just want to say continue being awesome and go build some great apps.
Wow. Well, I know the people in the chat are excited, and I know Mark is excited because he probably needs to take a moment to breathe now after all of that excitement. So, definitely a lot of great news there. That a lot of stuff has happened. A lot more stuff is coming, and we can't wait to show it to all of you. So I know we had a lot of questions. We're going to take those at the end, but now we're going to hand things over to Deborah. So next up is Deborah Kurata. If you missed it at the beginning, she is a consultant at InStep Technologies, and she's going to be talking to us about RxJS in Angular. And yeah, it's a little warm in this room as well, Darren, but can't wait to show you more. Take it away, Deborah.
I just had to find the unmute button. It's in a different place. All right, so we're going to talk about RxJS best practices and how they aren't always necessarily black and white. Are we ready to switch gears and talk about RxJS for a little bit? Okay, so I'm Deborah Kurata. I'm a software developer and a Pluralsight author. I have other courses too that I'm working on HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and GitHub. And the platform that I did them for just disappeared off the face of the earth. So if anyone has any suggestions of where I might find a nice home for my series of courses, I'm particularly happy with my GitHub course, and I'd hate to see it just in the trash can. But anyway, all right, so that's me. And that's me in my favorite place. If anyone knows me very well, they know where that is. All right, so best practices. My first best practice recommendation is to be declarative. So what does that mean exactly? Well, when we learn RxJS, we learn how to do it procedurally, usually. So we have some kind of function that we're creating. It's going to return an observable, in this case, an observable of user array. And we're going to issue our HTTP GET request, passing our URL and getting our data. And that's how we learned how to do RxJS. Simple enough. But you get a lot of benefits if you instead go declarative. So with a declarative technique, instead of having a function that we're going to call, we create a variable that we're declaring. And the rest of the code is basically the same. So kind of right from this here, we just cut that off and paste it right in there. And by having a declared variable instead of a function, we can more easily work with that observable. Here's some benefits. We can compose streams of data because once we have a variable that's holding that observable, we can compose them in different ways. So if we're getting data from multiple endpoints, which frequently happens in enterprise applications, you can more easily put those together. You can communicate better between components. Other parts of the application can subscribe to these observables and get notifications. We can also better manage our application state, and we can react to user actions. We're going to talk more about that one. Okay, so as soon as I say this, I always have the question, but Deborah, what about parameters? I have to create a URL with a parameter on it. I need the user ID in order to get this user. So I have to create a function because I have to pass in a parameter so I can give that parameter into my HTTP GET. So I can't do any of this declarative stuff. You don't have to have a functional approach in order to have parameters on our URL. What do we do instead? We go reactive. So what do I mean by that? That means that we're going to actually react to emissions in our streams, in our observables, instead of having to pass them in on a function. So how do we do that? I have a little scenario here that we're going to use as an example. And in this case, we want to retrieve user data. So we have a user, we're going to pick a user, or the user is going to pick a person here from the drop-down box. In our particular case, we can imagine that we have some team members. All of our teams are working on tasks. So here's our very Latin tasks. And we're going to be working on these. And when we come in the morning, we want to pick one of our team members and see how they're doing on their tasks. How many do they have completed? Where might I need to provide some assistance? Whatever. So when the user picks a person from this list, we take that ID and we need to go get that user using that ID. So we're going to need that parameter in our HTTP request, but we're going to do it without using a procedural approach. So we have steps. The first step is we're going to declare an action stream specifically for the action of selecting a user or selecting a person from the list. Then when that selection occurs, we're going to emit a notification. If we emit that ID, we can then react to that ID, which is our last step. And we can then issue our HTTP request, and we have that ID that we can use as our HTTP URL parameter. Okay, let's see that. Let's see how to do that in our code. So our first step was to declare an action stream. We normally do that with a subject or behavior subject. In this case, and in most cases, we actually want to build these in a service. So we make our subject or behavior subject private so that we can encapsulate that in the service. That way, none of the other components in the application can emit something into our stream or error out our stream or mess around with our stream. So it makes debugging easier knowing that the data can only be emitted into the stream from within the service. Then we declare our observable, and again, declarative approach. We're going to declare an observable, excuse me, sorry. We're going to declare an observable variable to hold on to that. And we're going to expose the read-only part of the observable. This is the part that people would subscribe to. So you can't actually emit anything into this variable. You have to emit into the subject. But this gives any component in the application the ability to subscribe and receive those notifications. So how are we going to emit the notification? Well, we've probably all seen this code before where we're just going to issue a next. So here again is code in our service, because our service is the only one that has access to our subject, and we're going to next in that user ID. Okay, our last step then, we're going to emit a notification when the action occurs and call the subject or behavior subject next method. Got ahead of my slides a little bit. I get excited too. Mark motivates me to get all excited about all of this. All right, so our third step then is to react to that notification. So we can perform an action when an item is emitted. So here is our action observable. We're going to pick one of the people from the list. We're going to have that action occur. The ID is going to be emitted. It's piped through. We can switch map on it. And hey, look at this. Our URL has a parameter, and we did not need to go procedural to make that work. Cool? Hopefully. Yes, Mark's energy is infectious. All right, so this also is useful for getting related data. So if we wanted to get all of the to-dos for that user, we could do something similar. It's also good if you have a save action. So we can use this approach for many different kinds of actions. Okay, so my next point that I want to talk about is merge map, concat map, and switch map. Oh my. If you go someplace like Stack Overflow and you read a little bit about these, you will see recommended again and again, the best practice is to use switch map. The best practice is to use switch map. But my point is that best practices are not always black and white. Which one of these three you use depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Switch map may not always be the best practice, again, depending upon your needs. So let's talk through these. And again, we're going to use the same kind of example, but in this case, we are going to want to get the related data. So here we're going to get the to-dos. So we're going to pick one of our team members here, and we're going to see their list of to-dos. And again, we need that URL to have that parameter of the user ID in order to get that user's to-dos, and we're going to return that as an array. So the question is, what kind of mapping operation are we going to use? Switch map, merge map, concat map. Okay, so one of the things when I was thinking about this, it happened to be when the Olympics was on, and I started thinking about concat, these three terms and the Olympics. And I kind of thought to myself that concat map is an awful lot like a relay. Basically, emitted values are queued and processed in order, just like the runners in a relay are queued. They then perform the mapping operation, which for a relay is the actual running. Each runner has to wait for the prior one to complete. The second runner can't just start running. The first runner has to complete before that second runner can start. And then it repeats. Then that third runner has to wait for that second runner. The fourth runner has to wait for the third, and so on. And concat map works the same way. It issues an HTTP request. It waits for it to complete before it will issue the next one. Excuse me. All right. It also retains emission order. Again, those runners, that first runner can't go past that second runner, and so on. Okay, so let's look at a more code kind of example. So here we still have our to-dos example, and we're going to use concat map. We're going to try that one out in order to get our related to-dos. And what's going to happen in this particular scenario is I come in the morning, I want to pick one of my team members, and I first pick the second one and then realize, no, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to pick the third one. I get their name, and then I realize, no, that wasn't what I wanted. I want the first one. So that's what these numbers mean here. The user, myself, I pick the second user, excuse me. I pick the second team member, then the third, then the first. So what's going to happen if I use concat map in this example, where the user can be selecting different things, is it's going to go get that second one because that's the one I asked for first, but then it's going to wait. It's going to wait till it gets that response back. So even though I've changed my mind and said, no, I want three, oh, no, I really want one, I'm still going to wait for two. Then it's going to get three once I get the response for two back. Wait for that response, then it's finally going to get one and wait for that response. So for our particular scenario, concat map is not our best practice. What is concat map good for? Well, we want to use it when emissions are processed sequentially and order matters. So some examples is if you are doing insert, update, and delete type operations, because you wouldn't want to perform that update until the insert of that row is there. So if a user did an insert and then an update, you would want to make sure you didn't try to update before the row was there. So concat map is really good in those situations. I think of merge map as something like the 800 meter. They all might start at the same time. All the values are processed immediately. They're all running right away. And then we're performing the mapping, which again, in our example is running. but the emission order is not maintained. So how you start out may not be how it ends. Whichever one is faster is going to finish first. And that's how merge map works. So again, going to the exact same example, but this time we're going to use merge map. So I pick the second team member, then the third, then the first. It's going to immediately issue those GET requests. Then they're going to finish based on how long they take. So in this particular example, there are fewer to-dos for the third person, so that one comes in first. Then the first person's response comes back, and then the one for the second person that I'd picked. So what that means is if I'm currently looking at the screen, I have the name of the first person, but the data, the to-dos for that second person on the list. So I've completely gotten the wrong answer back. So merge map isn't the best option in this scenario either. So when do you want to use merge map? Merge map is great when you want to process them concurrently because that's more performant, but order doesn't matter. For an example, you're retrieving related data when the criteria doesn't change. We'll look at an example of that in just a minute. But let's talk about switch map first. In this case, you can think of switch map as the coach changing their mind. I'm going to start with this runner. No, that one. No, this one. And that's kind of how switch map works. It's kind of just changing their mind. So the emitted value is going to stop processing of the prior emitted value, then switch to the new one, then perform the mapping operation, then actually do the running, and then repeat. So again, going back to our example with a switch map this time, what's going to happen is I'm going to pick the second one on the list. When I pick the third one, it cancels the second one. When I pick the first one, it cancels that third one. And the only response I get back is that last response. So in this particular scenario, Stack Overflow is right. Switch map is the best choice. So use switch map when only the latest emission matters. So the examples, retrieving based on user selection or type ahead functionality. But as we talked through, switch map isn't always the right choice based on what you're trying to do. Okay, so let's talk about three more: fork join, combine latest, and zip. So here's a simple example. I have a little observable here and another one here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's ABC, and I'm going to fork join those. Fork join is a creation function, not a pipeable operator. So note I'm not piping them through the fork join operator. I'm instead calling fork join to create a new observable from these two. And what fork join does is it waits for all of the observables, all of these guys inside the parentheses here, to emit and complete. Then it emits the last value from each observable. So this one is going to emit 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's going to emit and complete. This one's going to emit ABC and complete. And then the fork join emits the last value from each one. The 4 and the C is what it emits. So you think, okay, well, that doesn't sound very useful. But then we remember that when we're getting data, that response, when that response comes back, it completes. So every HTTP request we do is a request and a response. So it always emits and completes. And that then kind of makes fork join a little bit more useful. So let's look at another example. Here, we're going to get all of the users. So this is a little bit different of a scenario. We're going to get all of their users, and for each user, we're going to get all of their to-dos. So we're ultimately going to create a structure of an array where we're going to have a user in their to-do, and we're going to have an array of these. So we'll have a user with their to-dos, a user with their to-dos, and so on. So what this is going to do is we're going to use a merge map, because here we want to fire these all off as quickly as we can. And we're going to fork join all of the all of the retrieves, all of the gets for each of the users. So it's going to wait for all of them to complete. So we're going to get them all in before that fork join just returns that final result. Because with a fork join, we don't want to get one at a time. We want that whole set of them to come back. So we're going to get users with to-dos. Okay, so it's great for getting related data for each item in an array. So we're getting all the users, and then we're going to use those users to get each of their to-dos. All right, let's talk about combine latest next. And again, our example here is the same. It's a creation function, not a pipeable operator. It's going to wait for all observables to emit at least once. We need to watch out for subjects because those don't emit at least once. And then when any observable emits, combine latest emits the latest value from each observable. So this is different from the prior one, and this emits at least once, not completes. So this guy's going to emit. It's going to emit 1, 2, 3, 4. Combine latest isn't going to emit because that second stream hasn't emitted at least once. But as soon as the A emits, then it emits, then the combine latest emits the A and the 4 because it takes the latest value from each observable, then the B and the 4, then the C and the 4. Our last one, oh, here's another example then. Frequently, we'll use combine latest whenever we want to combine any data. So for example, if we want to combine all of our streams that we're going to use in our template so that we can have one stream that we, or one observable that we async pipe. So we can async pipe VM and we'll have access to all of our observables that we need. A zip is the last one then. It's a creation function, not a pipeable operator. It waits until each observable emits, then emits the value from each observable as a set. And it repeats. So a zipper kind of zips like you would think a zipper would. So it's going to wait until each observable emits. So it's going to emit. So the A will emit 1, 2, 3, 4. Then as soon as the B emits at least once, then it gets the A and it matches it up with the 1. And the B, it matches it up with the 2. The C, it matches it up with the 3. And it tosses out the 4. Okay, so a zip, you might use it for something like combining matching sets. I could match the users with their profiles if I knew that I had them in the right order. But they're also good for handling key and value pairs. So like if you were going to use a group by, that's the only place I've actually used it in practice is with regard to a group by for mapping together back the key and value pairs. Okay, really quickly, there's a couple of basic best practices I want to go through. First, don't forget to unsubscribe. If you subscribe, unsubscribe. But better yet, don't subscribe at all. Use an async pipe. You probably already knew these. An async pipe automatically subscribes, unsubscribes, and re-renders on each emit. Don't forget error handling. Here's a little example of how you would do it with the catch error. And this might be what our catch error looks like. And we return an observable of never. Don't nest subscribes. Here, this happens frequently if you're using the procedural approach where we're getting our user and then we are also getting our to-dos. So we've got a nested subscribe. We've got another subscribe within this subscribe. You'll see this often in procedural kinds of code. So we don't want to do that. The real best way to fix this is to go reactive and to use the code that we looked at before. But if that's not an option, a procedural way to improve this is to use a higher order mapping operator. So here we're subscribing on the outside, but on the inside, we're using this higher order mapping operator. And the higher order mapping operator will automatically subscribe and unsubscribe to this inner observable for us. And just some terminology, the outside one is the outer observable and the inside one is the inner observable. Looking at the picture, this makes sense, but when you just read it, it didn't make sense to me at all. But once you see it, it does make sense. And my last one, best practice number 1, I saved the best one for last. Have fun. RxJS can be fun to play with, so have fun while you're doing it. Here is the code if you're interested in looking at the code for this presentation, and thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Deborah. That was amazing. As always, the explanations were so clear, and I think everybody can understand RxJS a little bit better in Angular now. So yeah, if we do have some time for questions, so if you have any questions, definitely feel free to put them in the chat. I know we had a bunch of questions earlier on during Mark's talk, so he's been taking a peek at those. And then I think we had some general questions. I'll address those really quickly as well. So somebody asked if this will be recorded. It is being recorded. It should be available on YouTube at the same URL once we are done. And then another question was, what's the best way to transition from AngularJS to Angular 2 Plus after being on another framework for the last 5 years? So I know there were some excellent resources put in the chat. So there are old blogs out there. There's projects. There's a workshop project you can use on the Angular.io website. And there's Tour of Heroes. And Mark also, as you can see on the screen, Mark has a workshop that you can go through on YouTube. So definitely recommend checking that out.
And Deborah also has many courses that you can take. So between, I think, myself and Deborah, there's just a ton of content for you that is like beginner friendly and like best practices focused that you could do. Uh, yeah, Deborah, can you put that slide back that you had at the beginning where it had a list of the things that you teach? I want people to know that they can learn more from you across these different things.
Certainly.
And while she's getting that together, there weren't a lot of questions because it was mostly compliments for Deborah the whole time. Just about how people are like, wow, I finally understand this. Or 7 years of development. I've never understood RxJS. So if you really like the work that Deborah does and the way she explains things, here, I'm going to share the screen again. These are all the things that you can learn from Deborah. So please, uh, take advantage of her fantastic just instructional ability. It's really, really special. It was fun when I first met Deborah in person. I was like, oh my gosh, like the way she talks in presentations sounds like the way she teaches. And I couldn't believe that it was still the same, like, not only like instructional clarity, but like vocal clarity. Because I think that if Deborah had a career as a voice actor, she would also be stellar at that as well. And I was just like, well, she sounds the same in person. So let's
Thank you,
see.
Mark.
Yeah, of course. There were a few questions I did want to touch on that are Angular specific. What are plans for the micro front end architecture? So we have spent actually quite a bit of time looking into this, and so it would be. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah. Let me get this question back up here. Yeah. So we spent a lot of time looking into this for the micro front ends. And if you're looking for a micro front end specifically, there's still some like research we're doing, trying to figure it out. But I know if you want to do stuff right now with like module federation, there's Manfred Steyer who has like tons of content out there, so you can check that out. Real quick, is Protractor deprecated? Yes, I even wrote a blog about it being deprecated. It is deprecated. And why is it deprecated? Well, we felt like if this wasn't the best use of our time, we should focus on other stuff. And that's what we did. We just focusing on other stuff to help better serve the community. There's better solutions in the community. I mentioned some of those like Cypress, Nightwatch, WebDriver IO. There's just a whole bunch of stuff. Let's see. Let me pull a question that I think Deborah will be fantastic to answer here. Let me put this in here. I saw something about this. Deborah, this is a good question. Why RxJS instead of promises in Angular? What were some of the advantages that you'll get from RxJS?
Sorry, I was just replying to somebody on the chat. So RxJS versus promises. Well, one of the really nice things about RxJS is being able to pipe them through the subject and behavior subject that you can so easily react to user actions and then pipe them through a process That makes it really nice to combine them in different ways. That's what immediately comes to my head. There's just so much, as soon as you start going to a reactive approach and you have those as variables that you can do with them that you can't do either procedurally or with promises to really make that work like that, and have a pipeline of operations, and to have it actually have your UI change as the user is changing things in a very smooth way. I hope that answered that.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Question: with standalone components, is Angular moving towards promoting inline styles for simple components too? Sam Kavanaugh, let me tell you something. That's a great question. Here's what you should think about. Make sure that your components are always maintainable, not only by yourself, but also by your team members. So if a component has a simple, and by simple template, that's kind of hard to like describe, right? What is a simple template? I would say the better way to think about it is if there is a short template code, short styles, can fit into the file. But if your file grows too big, you want to separate concerns. So, but I like standalone components where everything's in one file. Like I like that look as long as it isn't too complex in terms of the length and depth of the templates and the styles. Definitely like it that way. Let's see. Do you think the future of web dev is oriented completely toward SSR like Mishko's new framework, Quick, server-side rendering? This is a question that I'll let Deborah also answer, give some feedback on this. So, Deborah, do you think that web dev is going to be completely toward server-side rendering?
I wouldn't think so, because sometimes like shopping cart is what I'm sort of thinking. You want it to be, as you're picking things and changing quantities, and you don't necessarily want to be doing that. It seems like you're almost kind of going back to the old ASP, with the going back to the server for everything. So I think that there are times, especially when you need for it to be reactive, to not be trying to do it all server side.
And we've been there before. That's where we started.
Yeah.
We started with everything was server side rendered. I think what you're gonna go ahead. Sorry, Deborah.
I just said with ASP. I mean, that's where at least that's where I started with active server pages. That's a Microsoft technology that everything came from the server. The browser was just a dead thing that took whatever ASP gave it.
Right, exactly. So I think you're going to find that there usually isn't a right solution for a undefined problem, not undefined, but like a non-deterministic problem. So is it all server-side rendering? Is it all client-side rendering? Well, we spent the last 15 years maybe developing client-side rendering, and now people are saying, oh, let's go back to the server. I think the solution is going to be do what makes the most sense in your use case. That's the better way to look at it. Let's see. I saw another question for you, Deborah, that I think we could use. Oh, this is probably good. This is a really good one. Okay. How do you test RxJS operators? Do you have any guidelines for people looking to test their RxJS pipelines and operators?
I'm a really bad person to ask about testing, because I probably don't test nearly as much as I should. There are quite a few other people like Joe Eames and of course Shai Resnick that are way into testing. Frequently what I have done is not really tested the operators. I'm assuming RxJS works, and testing people would shoot me, I think. But I assume that the operators themselves work, and so frequently I will have a function that performs a save, that I'll call the function in my pipeline, and I'll test the function as a regular function. And then I just assume that if my function is tested, that when I stick it in the pipeline, that RxJS works and it would do it. But again, I'm sort of almost embarrassed to be saying that.
No, I appreciate you answering that. So, with standalone components going stable, will material components be shifting to standalone? Okay, friends. So, some friends may be newer to Angular. So, we have our Angular material component. So, there's a bunch of stuff. If you go to, I think, material.angular.io, you get to see all the things of our like components that are based on material design. Will those be coming standalone, or will you still need a module? I think eventually we'll get there, but that's going to be a pretty big undertaking, Michael, to get all of them standalone. But I think that's something that we're looking at, and we'd like to know. We want to explore for sure. I know that's a non-committal answer, but it's something that we think about. That's not the answer. Let me answer this question though. What additional accessibility support is in Angular considering? Okay, Jay, good question about accessibility. My colleague Emma Tversky is really like spending lots of time thinking about accessibility in Angular. But I can tell you from this point of view, if you think about the CDK, our component development kit and Angular material, all those components go through pretty rigorous testing from internal Google standards and external Google standards in terms of accessibility. So you can feel confident in building your web applications with those components from the CDK and from Angular material, and know that they'll work with things like screen readers and live announcer and all things you can expect. Let's see. What else can we answer? I think I can take one or two more questions. Oh, there's a lot. Okay. Let me see. I know there were a few more questions from earlier. Let me see if there's any more. Oh, this is a good question. Will there be an effort to explore how TurboPack might fit into build tooling? Not right now. And I can say not right now just because TurboPack just got announced. It's an alpha. Here's the thing to think about for TurboPack. There's still quite a bit of migration for the community to do that I don't think has been defined yet. Meaning, what about all the plugins that work for Webpack? How do we get those to work with TurboPack? And I think that once some of those answers come out, and TurboPack matures a bit, maybe there will be something that we'll look into. But I don't think right now we're really able to like answer that. Okay, let's see this one question. Good question. If we suggest to use standalone APIs without ng modules, why does Angular still create an app module when we create a new app? We're working on that. We're working on figuring out what is the ng new story. And let me tell you why. The ng new story, we always have to think about not disrupting the community, right? And everything has to be smooth. So if we change the ng new right now to standalone components, what if somebody was working on a new application that they still have to use modules? Then we've created more drama for them. So we don't want to do that. We want to figure out what is the ng new story, where standalone, still fits in there. So we're looking at the tooling. We're trying to figure it. We're trying to figure that one out. But that's a good question. Very good question. Is hydration an Angular universal thing, partially rendered on the server and then rendering on the front end? We do destructive hydration, meaning that when your code, so it'll get rendered, and then when you send it, we got to like tear it down when we have to re-render the application with the Angular libraries in there. That's not efficient. So we're working on figuring out a better way. Okay, I think that's enough questions. I think that's enough. We've answered a lot of questions.
Alrighty.
And I answered some in the chat as well. So if you had asked a question in there, I tried to see it, like the one about the $sign and about completely going reactive. I put answers to those in the chat.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, Deborah. We really appreciate having you on today. We're definitely looking forward to having more of these events, and I imagine people will be seeing more of you in future meetups. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We had a lot of people, a lot of great questions, and definitely look for more of these meetups coming up. Again, if you missed at the beginning, we're going to do another joint meetup in November. Not sure about December yet, just because it's around the holiday time. People tend to go on vacation, so it's a little bit more difficult to line things up. And then we're excited to see people back in person in January. So if you're in the San Francisco, if you're in the Bay Area or in Mountain View, definitely encourage you to look for those. Join our meetup and keep an eye out for those. And we can't wait to see you all in person. And I know, maybe we'll get an opportunity to bring Mark and Deborah on for that as well. So, yeah. So, once again, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everybody.
All right, friends. Thanks for having us. Bye for now.
Thank you.